I just like to bring the word of God to you today about the fact that faith does not need the majority to manifest. An example is seen when the children of Israel went to spy the land of Jericho. 10 of them came back and said they cannot. Only 2 said they can and are well able to conquer the land. Now you need to know that those 2 spoke in favor of the word of God, spoke based on the desire and the will of God for them at that particular time. But the 10 others, even though there has been a word of God for them, I heard that they were going to conquer the land, that the land has been given to them as a promise, land flow with milk and honey. They spoke contrary to God's desire and God's will, even though God has already given them the word. Now, if you look around you, you can readily tell the voice that's contrary to the word of God. You can readily tell the voice that brings fear. You can readily tell the voice that speaks in favor of faith. And what do you do to have God fulfill His will and plan for your life? Is to tune off the words of fear, turn away from friends that speaks the words of fear, leave the group that keep broadcasting negative news contrary to what God has told you, or contrary to what the word of God that you daily read and confess has told you. So that is the best way to be able to focus. The thing is, in actual sense, there are so many times that when you look at what you are faced with, you cannot but be overwhelmed by fear, because sometimes some things look so much impossible and you cannot picture how it's going to come to manifestation. But that's the truth. God doesn't work based on what you see. If you see it, then you can achieve it. If you can achieve it, then you don't need God, you don't need faith. But if you can see through the eyes of faith, then you can see into the heart of God, and your heart can begin to imagine and grasp the manifestation of God's will. And that's how experience comes. Now, certain experience will bring you into the reality that if God has done this thing in my life, then He can do this again. An example is when at some point I was looking for an accommodation. The accommodation I was living before, the rent has been increased. Then I didn't want to stay in that particular place anymore. I wanted to leave. I had an option of going back to my parents' house, but I said no. I had already left the house at about 18 years old. Then so I didn't see that as an option, which would have been easy for me. But the other option was for me to look for another place. Now, what I had just about 40,000 naira, and I needed something, be feeling something very good. And I went out one of those days. I don't know what happened. My landlord in the current place I was living came and placed to let in that particular house. So people were coming to the house, or there was like an invitation of people to come to the house to look at the house while you were still staying there. The rent had expired. So I went out, and one of those days I just looked at a particular place. I saw an agent's office. I entered the place. I said, please, do you have a house in this particular? I said, you don't know, they don't have, but they have someone that they know someone that has an accommodation in that particular place. They called him, he came down, and we looked at the house, and I said I liked it. The rent was about 120,000 naira, and I said I was gonna take it. I had 40,000 naira. I wasn't expecting money from anywhere, and I told him, like, this is what I had. He collected the money from me and said, when do I think I'm gonna get this money? I said, in another 2 weeks. I said, okay. Took the money from me, made the key and gave me a key and told me to move my load to the house. And that was the best he could do for me. I moved my load to the house, and funny enough, how I started living in the house. Then exactly 2 weeks, on the last day, as I was opening my eyes from the bed, I got an alert. And I picked up my phone, I called them, I said, your money is ready. He sent me his account number, and I sent him the money. That was it. I would have given up to the fact that I could not raise that fund. But the point is, I held on to God, and God did that in my life. That gave birth to me believing God for greater things in my life, like how I concluded my master's program of, I mean, I don't want to go into details, but I know over time we're going to go into details of these things. And the thing is, if you cannot believe God for a 1,000 pounds project, you cannot believe God for a 10,000 pounds project. If you cannot believe God for a 10,000 pounds project, you cannot believe God for a 100,000 pounds project. If you cannot believe God for a 100,000 pounds project, you cannot believe God for 1 million or 10 million pounds project. So God takes us gradually so that we can see His faithfulness over time as He builds our faith. Don't forget, faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. So your level of faith is an indication of the level of your word. So pay attention to the word of God. Pay attention to people preaching faith that can build you up in the most holy faith, even as you pray in the spirit. God bless you, very good.